If you're looking to buy a used Google Pixel 4a, I got some news for you. The FBI has been very busy and they've conned the con men. I love this story. The FBI has been trying to track bad guys for a very long time, and there have been a number of ways they've done it. We know, obviously, about phone taps, right? We've seen those before. The old days, I don't know if you've ever been to one of the original telephone switching stations. Well, not even original, but the types they had in the late 60s, early 70s. I remember going to see one, and all of these switches were just going clack, 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 as people were dialing the phones and everything. It was just so cool. And back then, in order to trace a phone call, what they had to do is find the original source. So they would go to that row, that column, that exact little unit that was hooked up directly to your phone, and then they would see, okay, this is in position this, and then go to that next switch, okay, position that, next switch, position that, and go all the way through. That's the really older days, not the old days where you had somebody that was at a switchboard doing it. Nowadays, of course, it's all done by computers. The telephone company turns your voice into a digital signal, and it's usually done right in your local neighborhood. It isn't even done at the central office anymore. So by the time your voice is outside the central office, it's digital, it's hauled on, nowadays, even partially an internet protocol network. They used to use different protocols back in the day. And so it makes it quite easy for them to tap your line. Now, of course, there's the legal side of this. Do they have the legal right to do it? Do they need a court order? What kind of a court order do they need? Right? All of that stuff. But that aside, it's very easy to find out where a call went, where it came from, and to listen in, because it's just digital data. It's completely copyable with absolutely no particular problems at all in copying it. Last month, the FBI and the Australian Federal Police acknowledged that they had indeed been working on this encrypted device. And the company was called Anom, which is a fake company. And Anom sold 12,000 smartphones to criminal syndicates around the world. That's the wording that the police used. So these were being sold as secure devices. They did things like they removed the cellular modem functionality. They changed the boot ROMs. They removed the GPS. So the idea was, hey, you, Mr. Bad Guy, you can use one of our Anom phones, and it's using a special version of the Android operating system, and you can send messages back and forth. It's a completely secure messenger service, end-to-end encryption, right? Like we're always being promised. And so what happened is bad guys started referring other bad guys to this, right? Because if they wanted to talk to the other guy, they both needed these Anom phones. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to talk to each other. And so they were recommending the use of these phones to their friends that were in the illegal businesses as well. So this, I'm just chuckling. This is so great. So the FBI weaponized Android phones, at least this particular model of it. And there's a whole community in the Android world. It doesn't exist in the iPhone world because it's much harder to do in the iPhone world, but they call themselves the modding community. And so they'll get a phone from some vendor, they'll make some changes to it that lets it maybe change networks or do other fancy things. So the FBI used some of this technology, the modding community, and did some just amazing things with this custom ROM. Now, you're going to love this part, okay? So when you boot this phone up, this is according to ARS Technica, the phone will have, of course, a little boot screen. And the FBI's custom ROM here, which is the bootloader as well as other things, but it showed an Arcane OS boot screen. That's the name, Arcane OS. And it replaced the normal Android distribution that comes from Google with the FBI's Arcane OS screen. It's just absolutely phenomenal that these guys would do this and would fall for it. So the FBI told the criminals, alleged criminals, hey, these are secure devices. They're really focused on security. And there is a PIN scrambling fee. What would happen is on your phone, you might enter a PIN. Some phones you might use a fingerprint or you might use a Face ID. This was a security feature. And what happened is normally you've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, and you type in your PIN and off you go. What this did is it scrambled it. So it might be 9, 2, just scramble the digits up so that when you enter your PIN, you're not always touching the screen in the same place so that people could not guess your code from the fingerprints you were leaving behind. Now, this is also interesting. This is a great way to do it if you're doing it for real, having an anonymous phone. They had 2 different interfaces on the phone, and a different one would pop up depending on which PIN you typed into the lock screen. So the first PIN would show a bunch of non-functional apps that are pretty popular in the App Store, like Tinder, Instagram, Facebook, Netflix, Candy Crush games. So if somebody is checking out your phone, forcing you to unlock it, they're not going to find much. And by the way, none of those things work. But I would have, if I had designed it, I would have made them so that they would work. So you can fool someone that's trying to rob you and steal your phone. The second PIN that you could enter in, so you chose your PINs, but it was supposed to be the secure section of the phone. So it had a clock, a calculator, and the settings button. But the calculator app actually opened a login screen to Anom as an anonymous. And that, again, the bad guys were told, oh, that's a secure encrypted way to chat. This is just amazing. So they would use that. So they go into the calculator app and now allowed them to chat with their friends. But what they did not realize is it was actually sending all of the messages also unencrypted to the FBI. Okay, absolutely amazing. So now some of these bad guys are selling their phones online. Right, remember I warned you at the very beginning, if you're going to buy a Pixel 4a, you want to listen to this first because the bad guys are selling their phones online. So a number of people have been trying to figure it out, some posts on Reddit and elsewhere. You guys know how to deal with this arcane OS? How can I reset this? What should I do? Okay, a lot of confused people. How do I fix this thing? You're not going to be able to fix it, okay? By the way, this thing I think is really cool because the guy who he bought it, legit guy, bought it used. He said the installed operating system is Arcane OS 10. The system updater says that Arcane OS 11 is available for download, but I don't want to do it in case it makes something even harder to fix. So maybe the FBI is better at sending out updates and fixes than most of the Google Android vendors that are out there. I'm just laughing all the way through here. So there are some things that a tech-savvy user should know. So I want you guys to pay attention to this, particularly if you're using an Android device. So the first thing is when you start up a newer Android phone, one that's been made in the last few years, the first thing that happens is that Google runs something called verified boot. And that makes sure the operating system has not been modified. So the operating system from the manufacturer of the device will be signed using a cryptographically secured. What was happening here is these devices were failing verified boot, of course, because FBI had modified the boot ROMs. And if your device fails verified boot, your Android device either could be an unlocked bootloader or a relocked bootloader with tampered software, it's going to show a message. And in this case, the FBI devices just have a message that says, your device is loading a different operating system, complete with their yellow exclamation point icon and a link for Google support pages. Absolutely phenomenal. And by the way, the article, I'm sending this out in my newsletter, but it says operating system changes, Google has a notice. So it sent them to the legitimate Google support page. So there you go. There's a really good little piece of advice, right? Now, the FBI changed a lot of the Android operating system, stripped out a whole bunch of Android settings that might have revealed something about the fact that it really was a spy device. System settings for app storage and accounts have been removed. So pay attention, right? If your machine boots up and complains about the bootloader, you got a problem. And it isn't just Android. Obviously, Apple will do that. The newer versions of Windows are starting to do that as well with TPMs. And Windows 11 is really going to bring a lot of that to the forefront. Hey, you're listening to Craig Peterson, and you can find me online, craigpeterson.com. Check it out. And stick around.